Привіт! I'm Chuck Olinik, a Ukrainian-American who was baptized with the name Yaroslav, which is also the name that I use in the historical reenactment group, the Society for Creative Anachronism. And what I've been doing is I've been going through a bunch of research that I've done over the years, decades in some cases, on Slavic folklore and mythology and Slavic history. And I've been creating videos and putting them up on my YouTube channel, which by the way would be really cool if you subscribe to, and hoping that this information could reach a broader audience, especially for those people in the society if they're looking at developing Eastern European personae. So we're getting into the second part of our exploration of Kolduny. And Kolduny, these are the users of koldovtsvo, or the craft of the wise, magic, right? They were important figures in the skazki, the fairy tales, and the velichki, the stories of the spirit world that were supposed to be the eyewitness accounts. So let's take a look at who ends up becoming one of the kolduni. And please bear with me as I use terms like witch or sorceress or sorcerer, because the English terms are rather limiting, while the Russians and Ukrainians used a bunch of different terms. Some of it was because of regional stuff going on as far as languages, but also there were different words that were used to describe the Kolduny and what their specialties were. In popular belief, witches are divided into two categories: those who received witchcraft by inheritance and those who made a deal with evil forces. They were called respectively born and learned, and people believed that the former were much stronger and could do good in addition to bad things. If you were a witch who had become one by making a pact, you were only capable of evil. The ideas of why one could be born a witch, they were influenced quite a bit by Christianity, but hey, guess why? Christianity was trying to supplant the paganism. And one of those things that could be brought up by the by the church was the idea of legality of birth. So if a girl is born out of wedlock and her mother and grandmother had been born out of wedlock, then such a girl should become a witch. True solid girls, even with legal spouses, are also not exempt from this. The fifth or sixth of them was most likely to become a witch. Oh, and by the way, if you were a born witch, you would have a tail. And there's a Slavic proverb or a Russian proverb that says that a witch can be recognized by her tail. By the way, that tail's probably like a half inch to 5 inches in length. A learned witch becomes one after performing certain rituals related to the renunciation of Christ and blasphemy, or transferring witchcraft to a woman from a dying old witch. People believe that a witch cannot die if she does not transfer her power. But a prerequisite is acquaintance with a demon who makes a contract with a witch and cohabits with her. Then there's the rest. The image of the witch was accompanied by signs known to us from fairy tales, such as the hunchback and crookedness and boniness, etc. Then there are the accounts of the young peasant girl who learns from the witch in exchange for doing chores, and will eventually take her place. With the advent of Christianity, everything pagan began to be perceived as demonic, and the Kolduny as people entering into a relationship with demons. You could become a sorcerer or koldun by concluding an agreement with a demon, which is signed with blood on the hangman's skin and is reinforced by a blasphemous action on the part of a person. And there are some beliefs that say that a man who decides to become a sorcerer must sell his child to a demon. As in the case of witches, the sorcerer before his death is obliged to transfer his power. And the person who gets it ends up receiving the power of the demons who were serving the former sorcerer. Now, dying, hey, they're going to suffer terribly. Well, I guess that's kind of what death is about. Neither the witch nor the sorcerer can die without passing on their sorcerer's knowledge to some kind of a successor. Some of those are willing. But if there are no people willing to voluntarily take on the burden, the sorcerer can transfer his abilities by deceit. They can hand something to someone while saying, on you. It's kind of like, not it. That person, without knowing it, becomes a sorcerer. Or the sorcerer can even do something like throw a stick, and the person who picks it up, you've got the job now. By the way, if you involuntarily receive this power, you can get rid of it by praying. The distinguishing features of a koldun or a sorcerer are basically the same as those of a witch. Hunched, crooked, lame. There's supposed to be some kind of injury, like no right hand. Sometimes red hair. The eyes could be like black or red. 2 rows of teeth. I think someone would notice that. Some beliefs say that the sorcerer has one human soul and the second is demonic. And for this reason, the sorcerer turns into a ghoul after death. And to me, that sounds like something I put in the 39th video in this series about the undead, that if a task wasn't accomplished, you might become, you'd made an agreement with a demon that you would fulfill part of a bargain, and if you didn't fulfill it, you became a changeling of some type. There is a reference to Ivanitz wrote about a suicide could become a devil's mount, and that demons would ride you around. And I think that's actually kind of a related idea to if a sorcerer doesn't fulfill a bargain. So bad things are happening in your village. People are getting sick, or cows stop giving milk. People get into more arguments. There might be problems in families. This could be spoiling. And you need to find out who is doing the spoiling in your village. So how do you identify them? Well, besides a prejudice against bony people with big noses, judicial documents from the time period mention a lot of objects that if you had possession of them, that's going to arouse suspicion amongst the peasantry. And that could be things like various grasses or roots or bones or snakes or bats or frogs, all that fun stuff. Also, remember, spoiling could be a means of transferring magical power. So maybe you're looking for something that doesn't belong to that person. So it might be a belt or a collar or hair or the earth surrounding a footprint, which would be interesting to try to identify, or something that would be consumed by that person, like food or drink or salt, and that could be just as suspicious. So you're looking for these things, all right? And Something that was particularly important was a zagovor, or a charm. It's an utterance thought to possess magical powers. They also existed in written form, or on pieces of paper, or in notebooks. So guess what? Scraps of paper, you know, they become objects of suspicion. You know, a letter or a notebook, that's grounds for accusation against, or accusation of sorcery, which means the literate people get in trouble. But hey, that tends to happen now. People are suspicious of those who read books. All right. And these could serve as incriminating evidence. Talismans, written charms that are combined with special grasses or roots, right? The earlier reference. And they're combined into nausea or amulets. Or you might have something like a snake skin or a bird's nest. That gets you in the hot seat too. We all know about the horrors of the Inquisition and witch hunts in Europe and America, blinded by fear, superstition, and sometimes just plain old jealousy and envy, and hiding behind religious piety. People executed hundreds and thousands of witches and sorcerers, those whom they call, or at least those whom they called witches and sorcerers. A slight suspicion was enough for a person, and most were women, to be accused of witchcraft. And this was followed by a test to make sure that the accused was really a witch. And these tests were already pretty cruel and similar to torture. No, they were torture. Like the water test. The bound victim thrown in the water. But things were very different in the land of the Rus and in Russia. In Russia, the majority of those accused or convicted, they were men. In Kievan Rus and Ukraine, the majority of those convicted were women. In documents that were from Muscovy, those that were convicted, burning at the stake wasn't an automatic thing. Now, sometimes it happened, but it wasn't an automatic thing. If it happened, it was usually in conjunction with other crimes that the person had been found guilty of. Exile or confinement to a monastery, those were a lot more frequent punishments. Now you get over into Kievan Rus and Ukraine, there's a much milder picture. Official punishment normally was a fine, swearing an oath, church penance, though burning at the stake was not unknown. The church and the secular authorities were much more concerned with heretics and blasphemers and apostates and the kolduny, the users of magic. They could fall into that category. And the punishment for the heretics and blasphemers and all that, they were put into a log cabin that was specially built for the occasion, and the cabin was set ablaze. Well, there's our exploration of Slavic sorcery. I hope you stick around and, watch the other chapters that I come up with on Slavic folklore and mythology and history. Until then, do pobачення.